Hey everybody, Fishman here. Welcome to the video. This is the carbon filter put together a little while ago now, and I've been using it on some of my larger aquariums. It's a great little filter. It helps remove those organic molecules that build up and helps keep the water nice and clear. Now, in smaller aquariums, it's quite easy to just do a water change and deal with them, but on tanks over 300 gallons, it is a little bit more difficult and sometimes time consuming, labor intensive to do those water changes. And this really does help. It does make that so much simpler. Now, when I originally designed this filter, though, I had not intended it to be a water polisher. I was actually just going to put a really coarse sponge in here just to keep any of the big stuff out. But I decided at some point to put in a piece of polywool. And this particular polywool does really, really well if you let it get a little bit dirtier, as you can see here. And I actually really like the look of it and the effect on the aquarium. The problem is, though, because I don't go to some of these tanks very often, they can plug up and the water level will rise, and there's a chance that it will overflow down the sides of the filter. Now, the bracket this sits on does have a built-in safety guard for that, but if there's enough splashing, there's a chance it'll drip down the side of the aquarium, possibly cause water stains and that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to modify this so that is no longer going to be a possibility. And that's actually a good thing because I don't like water, well, I don't mind it on my floor, but clients do not like it on theirs. So I am going to take care of that, and I am going to... the easy thing about this, and this is the reason why I like designing filters and working with them for a while and then making some changes. This particular filter is so easy to modify. All I need to do for this is trim off whatever I figure is going to be the right amount. In this case, it turns to be about 1.25 inches. And that's going to allow this to sit down further in the filter. And as you can see here, this is so easy to do on a table saw. And it's just 4 quick cuts. And pretty much that is all I would need to do. But I am going to do a little bit extra for this because I do want to doubly ensure that is not going to be an issue. So I'm going to do these 4 cuts, and then we're going to do something else as well. Now, the reason why this could be enough is because this is going to sit further down now, which means the polywool is going to have another 1.25 inches above it before water can have any possibility of getting going over the sides. And that means the hydrostatic pressure that's going to build up over that is going to ensure that, well, not ensure, that's why I'm going to a greater extent, but it is going to cause enough of a pressure that it is much more difficult for this to overflow. You'll see here in a second as I put this in. Like I said, there's just a couple of quick cuts. This slides back down inside. It only goes in one way, by the way. That also helps me lining things up. And now all that extra height means that it is, again, that much more difficult for this to build up enough back pressure for it to overflow. And that is probably all I really need to do. What I'm going to do instead, though, is I am going to also add an overflow pipe so that if it does happen to build up anywhere near the top, it's just going to go through a hole, and it's going to go down and drip back into the aquarium. So that means I need to drill a hole in the side of this, and that hole needs to be fairly close to the top, which also means it is going to be really close to the edge. Now, I prefer drilling my acrylic pre-assembly. That way I can clamp it down firmly, have full back support, and I don't have to worry about cracking anything when it's especially close to the edge like this. But I don't have that option, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to clamp it down not too firmly because, again, you'll put pressure on the joints, and that could cause some cracking in the seams, so I have to be, again, very careful about that. As you see, I cut a piece of plywood, and that's going to act as my back support when I drill through this. And I would prefer to drill this probably in smaller steps. Creep up on the final dimension a little bit more slowly. I don't really have enough high-quality drill bits for that sort of thing. Now, if I tend to buy my tools through necessity. If I can get by with what I have, I do, because I mean, I have a ton of tools, and I suppose a few more really wouldn't make much of a difference. But if didn't control it at least a little bit, I suspect I would have far more than I have now. And again, I have enough. So I've never really had any issues with this cracking. I do have to be a little bit more careful, but it's not something that is too big an issue. So there you go, holes drilled, and now it's a simple matter of setting up the fitting for this. It's something I wanted to do a little bit more simply. Normally what I did for this sort of thing is I would take the piece of the fitting for the inside of this has to be fairly flush. As you saw when that thing slid down, there wasn't a whole lot of room there. So I need to cut it fairly close. Now, usually I put it on a lathe for that, but I had recently built this bandsaw sled. I'll leave a link below if you want to go and check it out. It's on the other channel. And it does cut really nice straight holes, and I do need to get a little bit close to that. So I figured I'd just pop it on here. It only takes a few seconds, and again, it's very useful cutting nice straight holes and, nice straight cuts. And again, it's very much simpler than setting up the lathe to do this. And you can see here in a second, it just cuts right through quite easily. As you're going to see in a few seconds, it unfortunately does not cut close enough. It's perfectly fine for most applications, but I left a little bit too much on the wall there. And after the first cut, it's very difficult to use a bandsaw like that to cut, trim it down a little bit, like a few hundredths or whatever. The trouble being, of course, with a bandsaw is if you're trying to trim off just a little bit like that, you run the risk of the blade deflecting. Again, it's just a band of metal, and it has not as much rigidity in the side to side as you will obviously with a lathe that's designed for taking off very small amounts, and very small amounts from much harder materials than plastic. So I wanted to try it out. It did a perfectly good job, and if I was building this, or designing, I should say, right from the beginning and allowing for that hole, I would have just made this piece here that little bit narrower, or the gap a little bit bigger, and this wouldn't be a problem at all. So it would work perfectly fine for that. But when it comes to doing these kinds of modifications, sometimes you need that little extra bit of finesse. And nothing's better for that sort of thing than a lathe. It will take off very small amounts, and you can shave off a bit, test fit it, and then put it back on. As a matter of fact, I think I did that twice here, and you can creep up on something that you're quite happy with. And in truth, it doesn't really take that long to set up. It's just, I wanted to try out the bandsaw sled for this. And as you saw, it does cut really nicely, and does cut a really nice smooth fitting, but it was just a little too thick. So this is quite simple now. I'm just going to trim this down and going to put it in place. And then that's pretty much it. I'm going to save a lot of the end bits of this for when I do the install back on the aquarium it's going to go on. I haven't cut the pipe for it yet. I think, well, again, I'll do that when I'm there. It just needs to be slightly above the water surface, and when I took this off, I didn't bother measuring it. It wasn't, like I said, not really that necessary. It's just something that's quite easy to do on site. And then that's pretty much it. So there you go. It's all modified now. I added a washer on the outside. You can't quite see it here, but you will when we get a little closer. That way I don't have to tighten this down too tightly. And also, the other thing I'm going to do before I do the final install is I am going to add a little bit of silicone in there, because there's not really going to be any real pressure on this fitting. But there is some risk of water creeping around the fitting and then dripping down the side. And seeing how that's why I'm doing this in the first place, to avoid all that, it's probably a good idea that it has a nice watertight seal and I don't have to worry about it anymore. So there you go. This is all done. Just a matter now of extending that pipe when I get on site. And the reason why this is not fitting on properly is it's meant to be 90 degrees rotated clockwise, because I like to draw water from one side and let it go at the other side. Not a big deal with the tank this is going on, because, let's see, it has two water pumps on it. One is 1,800 gallons of water an hour, and the other is 2,400 gallons of water an hour. But it's just one of those design features I like to work into all my filters in case I put this onto something that's, has a much slower current in it. So there you go. It's all done. You can see the nice tight trim you can get with a lathe. And let me know what you think below in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video, and bye for now.